Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, if ever the public of New Zealand needed another example of how out of touch and removed from the community this national government have become, they just got it from that member, Paul Foster-Bell. Although I will acknowledge it is the single biggest contribution that he's made to parliamentary proceedings so far this year. Mr Foster-Bell basically compared New Zealand's universities to businesses and said they should operate like businesses. How out of touch can he be? And I want to quote from the chair, or the then chair, of Universities New Zealand, in other words, the former Vice-Chancellor's Committee, Professor Roy Crawford, who said, and I quote, "The world's leading universities have councils that are larger than company boards. They are not based on a business model. This is a strength, not a weakness. They recognise that it is essential to have a wide range of viewpoints and perspectives to inform and enrich their decision-making." Now, Mr Foster-Bell said, oh, well, these changes are relatively new and not all universities have adopted them in New Zealand yet. No, that's right. They haven't adopted them because the universities themselves opposed them. Now, I sat on the Education and Science Select Committee when the original bill introducing the changes that shrunk the size of university councils down went through. How many submissions does the members think there were in favour of those changes? How many submissions in favour? Absolutely none. Not one single submission was in favour of the changes introduced by the national government. Every single submitter opposed the changes being introduced, and they did so very, very vocally, and their voices fell on deaf ears. They were completely ignored by the national government. Now, I bring a perspective to this as somebody who has served as a student representative on our university council. Chris Bishop's nodding over there. I'm not sure that he ever quite made it that far. Oh, he did make it that far. Oh, well, there we go. He was elected as a student representative on a university council. Well, there you go. And I hope that he will recognise the value of student representation, unlike the person who was previously sitting beside him and contributing, Paul Foster-Bell, who doesn't see the value of student representation. And I want to bring one specific example of the value of that student representation to the University Council, and that occurred during the time that I was on the Victoria University Council, where the then Vice-Chancellor, Professor Stuart McCutcheon, my good mate, Professor Stuart McCutcheon, brought forward a proposal to change the academic grievance procedures of the university that would have effectively required students who went through the academic grievance process unsuccessfully to appeal to the courts. It would have removed their right to appeal to the University Council. So it would have effectively forced students who were having difficulty with the institution to go directly to the courts. We went to the council as the student representatives, supported by the staff representatives, and actually made the case that this recommendation would create more risk for the university, not less. Do you know who backed us? The people that backed us at the council to overturn the recommendation of the Vice-Chancellor were the business people sitting on the University Council. They recognised the contribution that the student representatives were making, an opinion, a voice that would not have been heard had we not been there to give a contrary view. And in the end, that recommendation did not proceed. And that was a good decision. And as a result, we ended up avoiding opening up the university to much greater risk through a decision, through a recommendation that hadn't been properly thought through. I want to return back to Professor Crawford's comment, when he said that the original changes proposed by the government represented a fundamental misunderstanding of the distinct role universities play in societies. And he went on to talk about the universities' need for autonomy and academic freedom so that they can be the critic and conscience of society. And the changes introduced by the government absolutely undermine that, because they increase the amount of ministerial control over university councils and decrease the amount of democratic representation that exists, of independent representation that exists on university councils. There are a lot of good reasons why that is a bad thing. The example I mentioned is one of them. There are many others. Our universities should be independent of the government. Of course, the government is a significant stakeholder, as a significant funder. It has representation on the council, but they should not be and ultimate control, which is what they are going to become if the changes introduced by Stephen Joyce are fully implemented. This is a good piece of legislation because it allows the institutions to determine what the ideal composition of their council should be. They make the decisions, not the government. That's the way it should be.
The Honourable